Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Business. My name is Kevin Britz. I'm an executive coach, leadership facilitator, and the host of the Lunchtime series. My co-host, Pieter, an action coach and business and transformational coach. Pieter, how are you doing?
Hi, Kevin. I'm doing fine. Thank you on this beautiful Friday afternoon. I must say that this is becoming my highlight of the week. I'm so passionate about business, and I know that you are as well. And thanks again for having me. I thoroughly enjoy this.
Fantastic, me too. Pieter, so I know that we followed, for the last couple of weeks, we've been following a wonderful step process that showcases businesses out there, especially small to medium businesses, on taking action on making it happen for themselves, especially during this time of COVID. So from your side, don't you want to give us just the first 3 steps that have been covered, and then give us the idea of what we are talking about today on our 4th step?
Yeah, I will do that with pleasure. All right, so we started off a few weeks ago with mastery, which is the first building block in eliminating the chaos in one's business. Talk about destination mastery and money mastery, time mastery, and delivery mastery. Then we also had went to the second step, which is niche or marketing as such per se, creating your unique selling proposition and creating a guarantee, and along those lines, talking about the 5 ways of marketing in your business. And then last week we had the 3rd step, which is leveraging your systems, creating the systems in your business. So the systems work your business, and your people work your systems, and you support your people. And today I would like to take us to the next step, which is teams, and what do you do with your team? And I know that you are also very passionate about this, and in your coaching, this is also what you do. So yeah, please let's have a great discussion around team, because that's such an important part of our business. The people that work for us is your greatest asset. It's also your most expensive asset most of the times. So yeah, that's very important to look at that.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Pieter, so to kick off today's conversation, step number 4. So tell us about that step. What is the first step to step number 4?
All right. We, as action coaches, call it, there are 6 keys to a winning team. Right. So that's our paraphrase for it. So the first step, the first key is leadership, or strong leadership. Now, emphasis on strong leadership and not just leadership. And this is where I would like to pick your brain a little bit, given and engage in, because this is your forte. You are the leadership guru in our conversation today. So strong leadership is such a vital part of a business, even a community. Doesn't matter, but in business specifically. Now, we're not talking about management. Management, you have to have management as well, but leadership is a total different kettle of fish. Do you agree?
You know, Pieter, I'm so glad that we are touching on this point. I think a lot of businesses, especially when you're a smaller business, or you're just starting out, a lot of businesses kind of don't think that going through a bit of a leadership process is necessary. And yet, one of the premises that we sort of, as a foundational, that I lay specifically when working with leaders, is no one performs over and beyond their own self-image, as a premise. And when you take that line into consideration, it's like, well, what does that mean? What does it mean? And what are you talking about my self-image now, but essentially, you want to be able to look at dealing with underperforming employees, and simply what is holding them back, and what is holding you back as a leader in your environment, from a perspective of goal setting and improving your management skills. What does that look like, and how does it play out in your environment? Part of staff retention. It's so important when you consider the importance of keeping good staff, and making sure that your staff are committed to your business, but also have that same drive and that purpose, and functioning from a goal perspective, to understand that we're all on the same page, moving in the same direction. And then, you know, part of that leadership that we specifically deal with in our leadership programs is the attitudes and continuous improvement of you in your environment, because I think that most people, they just they kind of go, yeah, you know, this is working, let me do what I'm doing, and they forget that like they
Absolutely.
need to take a step back and kind of go, let's get our brains wrapped around what leadership actually looks like. So absolutely on right on par with what you're saying. You know, it's so important that we get our leadership really honed and skilled in the best possible way.
Absolutely. So when you look at yourself as a business owner and managing people and leading people, there's a difference for me lies in the leadership you create. Followers. People will follow you because of the fact that you are giving them something to follow you for. Okay.
Yeah.
Whereas management, you've got the structure and you need to implement that, and that needs to be done. So we can't basically, if you're a one single owner in a business and you're the only sole proprietor, the sole director, whatever, it's very difficult. You can't split the two. Am I right? Sometimes you have to be the leader and sometimes you have to be the manager. And I think people are struggling a lot with that. Now, in the process as well, now you're also not just the leader and the manager, you also have to sometimes just do the work that's in front of you to actually keep the ball rolling and keep the production line going and get the people in. So this is where the dilemma comes in. That's where leadership programs like yours, I think, are vital for business owners. It's coaching per se, as the same as with what we do, it's so important to give a business owner that he knows or she knows what's the difference between managing now and leading now. Where do we go from here? Okay, because as I said, the second key to is common goal, and you've already touched on it. People will follow a leader if there's something that's worth following him for. And to create that in a business environment, it's not the goals out there that needs to be achieved, R1 million turnover this month or 5 million in a year, or that's not the goal we're talking about here. It must be something completely viable for them to follow you, creating that safe environment as well as a leader to follow you,
But I
creating
think
that common goal.
But I think on that point, you know, what I think very often that I find, especially when I'm doing executive coaching, especially when you're working through leadership programs, the simple phrase of what is it that you want, you know,
Absolutely.
people don't know what to say. People don't know what the answer is, purely based on the fact that they kind of just in life, in this moment, going and doing what they do. And yet when you ask someone, so tell me who you are and what you do and what's your purpose, what are your values? There's a lot of floundering around like, I kind of sort of maybe, and the aim really is to say, you know, people will follow a leader who is goal orientated, who has a vision. It's easier for people to be able to connect with someone who drives that leadership and sort of shows up for them and goes, guys, these are the goals that we're looking at. Let's get some insight. Let's work together in producing the best possible team from a leadership perspective, but also from a team perspective, so that you have that beautiful buy-in from everyone. And that's not management. You know, management is working in the business, managing processes, managing situations, and getting things done and meeting deadlines. A leader shows up differently. A leader shows certain types of quality. A leader, you know, it almost becomes an intangible. It's like, this is what my leadership is, because and only you as the business owner, the person who's actually that core person, would be able to define that on what that plays out for your own business or your environment.
Precisely, given. So this is where a coaching do come in, and coaching becomes a vital part of business, especially smaller businesses and medium businesses where there's a core group of, let's say, 5 business leaders to lead their team it becomes vital to differentiate between the management part and the leadership part. And now going back to step one, okay, the building block number one, where we said in mastery to destination mastery. If you create your vision where you are going, and it's in such a way created that people will buy into that as your team, they will follow you and they will do that to the end of the earth because that's what they believe in. So what I also find a lot of businesses create this brilliant vision and a mission, but it gets shoved away in a shelf or in a drawer somewhere along the line. It's not revisited often. Okay. So yeah, that's what.
No, I've recently actually spoken to a potential client who had a hugely successful business, but the circumstance was that two of the directors were not agreeing with the third director, and they kind of never found each other, and still don't find each other on the same wavelength, you know. And I think it becomes such a, you know, in long-term vision, it becomes such a destructive way of looking at your business or performing in your business, because essentially when the leaders of the business do not speak the same language and really have that same driven goal, how do you eventually get to a point where the people are supposed to follow you? You know, because, and that's what's beautiful about having an executive coach. It's what's beautiful about having putting people through a leadership program, is because then it becomes a mastermind of minds where people are sort of going, okay, let's start behaving the same. Let's start actioning the same goals. Let's start speaking the same language. And the more that's driven, the more success is at the end of that road, because it becomes a joint co-creation of minds. And it's such a beautiful way of actually moving forward in businesses today.
Absolutely. So we will get to that a little bit later on.
Yeah.
When we talk about 100% involvement and inclusion, which is key number 6. But this is a very interesting point that you are raising, because there are so many. I've actually had it now lately in one of my sessions as well, where there's so many different ways of thinking and there's no synergy. All of a sudden, the team values fall out of the window, fall by the wayside, because no one has got the same direction from the leadership and from the team, because there's none. Okay, because this one's pulling this way and that one's pulling that way. It creates havoc. So leadership needs to be aligned and looking and achieving the same goal, the common goal. That will let the team follow. Okay, I want to go to key number 3, which is the rules of the game.
Yeah.
Now, this also goes back to mastery in the beginning, where we said, okay, the rules of the game is your culture, your way of doing work, your absolute values of your company. Okay. Once again, in the beginning of my experience, the beginning of a business starting 10, 15, 20 years ago, they've got this brilliant culture that they created that's written down. It's all beautiful, but it never gets revisited. And some companies don't even have a culture. They've got it in their head, but it's not. When you do an induction every year where you actually revisit those cultures and say, but this is what we are. We've got 12 points of culture. This is the rules of the game. You need to have integrity. You need to be committed. You need to have fun. You need to have, like, we've got 14 points of culture as action coach. That's what we live by. And I know that you guys as well, there are certain things that you live by. Those are the rules of the game, and you have to have them daily, I would say, revisited so that everybody knows. And when you employ new people, this is what they need to abide by. If they are not happy with, let's say, integrity, for instance, then they are not cannot be part of your team, because that's one of your culture statements. That's your points. That's the way that you do business that needs to be looked at.
Do you know, Peter, what I want to add to what you're saying is, I think, and especially when it comes to when you use the word culture, you know, and from my setting, it's always a case of saying, well, let's evaluate what the value system is, and I always take from that perspective, if your sales staff or your kitchen staff and your managing director or your financial director don't give you the same answer when you ask them, what is the three top values of this business, it literally means that nobody knows. It literally means that it's been a wonderful exercise that a bunch of people had in a boardroom, and they thought, hey, well, this sounds good. And then suddenly, you know, it's a nice thing that they send every time someone new comes into the business, and they're like, these are our values and this is what we live by. And yet it never actually happens. So one of the processes we follow quite specifically is we give you an actual values exercise and go, okay, cool. Not only do we want to know what your value is and how it's held in strength and wonderful foundation in your business, I ask the question, what does your value behave like? And the moment you ask
absolutely.
that, you know, people like, for example, integrity it's a beautiful thing to have, you know, it's wonderful. But when you ask someone, tell me what integrity behaves like, people suddenly take a step back and go, oh God, I have no idea what that means. I don't know what that looks like. I don't, and that's the key element. It's really to get your brain wrapped around, if you're going to be looking at the rules of the game, you actually have to be able to define those rules to
Absolutely.
anyone in your organization or in your business, and everyone has the same conversation about it. That's the key element about really knowing those rules for the game.
I agree with you full-heartedly. And yeah, we, as I can refer to our company, when we get together, there are culture champions. Out of the 14 each month, there's a culture champion. And that they need to revisit that specific culture with the description and with everything, and make us as coaches aware, this is what you need to be looking at. This is what you need to look like as a coach. And which is brilliant. And that's why I say you need to revisit that often. And as you rightly say, the value behind it, what does it really mean? And
Absolutely.
my experience as well, you can walk into any workshop anyway, and what is your culture statement or culture? Or what is your culture? The people say, oh, I don't really know. Most of them, we haven't got a culture. We just work, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it gets created over a period of time, as leadership gets created over a period of time, and as you grow in your business and your environment, this will create that culture.
Yeah.
All right, so key number 4 is action plan. So action plan simply states 90-day planning or annual planning. We use a 90-day plan, okay? But that planning is not just figures. We need to get so much in that. It's actually when you've got a plan for your recruitment, how do you do your recruitment? Is there a 4-step program that you follow to do your recruitment? That type of planning, how is that in your planning regarding your succession planning? Who's replacing who, when, and what, and that type. So that's very important as well. Okay,
and Peter, so I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because, you know, part of our leadership programs that we sort of showcase is we look at it as a total leadership concept. You know, we go from productivity and how to actually really wrap your brain around what productivity looks like. We look at effective personal leadership and how to show up in a personal leadership capacity. We look at motivational leadership, and then we look at strategy. You know, so it's part, and you know, succession planning is so important, especially when you have a business that is growing and you kind of have to go, okay, what are the next steps? What are the next steps? It's so important to have that plan and have these kinds of plans in your business. And it doesn't even have to be as detailed, as long as there's an actual plan and you know, well, this is what I'm following, this is where I'm going, this is how I'm going to action it.
Absolutely. Okay. So let's look at key number 5, which is support risk taking. Now, whenever I mention this in a seminar or a workshop with clients, how can I support risk taking? What is risk taking? But in a changing world, and we are in a fast change, we've already changed since last week, if I can put it that way. It's changing so fast.
All the time.
And your people that work for you, that the team that you lead, they go through the same changes as we as leaders go through. We don't always acknowledge that. So somewhere along the line, they're going to have to do things because of the changes differently. And you might not be there all the time. So when they take a risk and actually saying, but okay, I'm going to do it this way. It works better this way, and it works. Good. Everybody's happy. But now sometimes they make a mistake. And that's what we talk about, the risk taking, the support that risk taking. If you don't support that in your team, they will only be workers and sit like that, and you will not grow your business. That's unfortunate. But that's the reality. Do you agree?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was having a chat with a woman in leadership today, and part of my entry point this month is really, because it's Women's Month coming up in August, and in support of women in leadership today, or in the world today. And the conversation, one of the key components that she attributes to her success, and she's been running, her business for the last 27 years. So the key attribute that she speaks about is being able to empathize with people, as a leader in the world, to really be able to get your brain on board with, or how do I make people matter? And the moment you kind of wrap, especially from a leadership perspective, when you wrap your brain around that, suddenly how people respond to you is also very different, So coming from a business perspective, if you aren't actively practicing empathy, you're probably missing the mark a lot of the time, because people may feel quite disconnected from you. But yeah, I 100% agree with what you're saying here, Pieter. It's so important.
Okay. So the last key is actually 100% involvement and inclusion. Okay. So the 100% involvement, I can explain it the best this way, if you will bear with me. Yeah. There's a saying that goes around that says that if you want something done, you give it to the busiest person.
Yes.
Okay.
Give it to me. I'm the busiest.
But that's it. But what do we actually do by doing that? We are driving that one or two persons that really works hard, and they're prepared to stay longer, and they're walking the extra mile, but you're driving them into the ground.
Yeah.
Creating a 60% contribution from someone else, creating a 30% contribution for someone else. Because don't worry, he or she or whatever, they will do it, don't worry. Instead of focusing the leadership and looking at the people that's not performing and picking them up to the same level as what the other people that's really performing are. And we lack that, but because we use the time excuse, we haven't got time. We have to get that and that out. That and that must be done. We need to get it. So productivity is actually, in my view, hampered because we are pushing someone to the limits instead of pulling the other people up. Because of what we use as an excuse as time.
Sorry, I just want to add to that, Pieter.
No,
I think,
please.
The key component, one of the foundationals that we start off specifically in leadership programs is time management. And the reason for that is, and it's wisdom of the ages. This is not something that we need to learn or we haven't heard before. One of my clients is he's a financial director for a very big company, and one of his key disabilities that he's having at the moment is time management, you know. So we literally breaking it down into practical steps on how to time manage better, because even as a financial director, you know, you get to that point and you kind of you're just running out of time, and you're just like, well, how much discipline are you sort of setting up? What systems are in place? What actions are you taking? How are you literally getting that brain language on board with what it is you're supposed to do? Because if you're not doing it, and it's not, if you're not cognitively involved with your time management, it's going to run away with you. And then by the end of the day, you're 6 months later, you're going to go, oh my goodness, like, what have I done in 6 months? I don't get to, and it's purely based on you know, not having that as an actual leadership skill. And it's so important and vital for people to actually get time management down and be able to do that. And as a leader, you know, in my opinion, if you don't, if you're running out of time, you don't have a handle on it. You know, you really need to kind of wrap your brain around it and go, I'm working in my business, and I'm probably micromanaging this process instead of working on my business and delegating, because that's another thing that a lot of leaders also don't really know how to do. But yeah, I mean, it's I agree. It's foundational. It's starting with the little things.
Absolutely. So when we talk about inclusion, leaders, managers should include everybody as well when it comes to even decision making. Now, this is something that we are not used to, that to include our team in making decisions, specifically strategic decisions. Because if you can now go back to the common goal, if they are part of your decision making process, getting their ideas, getting everything, brainstorming, SWOT analysis, whatever, get them involved in things like that. Once there's a new strategy, they will buy into it immediately and follow it, because it's a common goal, because they've agreed to it. And I know that that's a very contentious issue maybe sometimes, for involving, what must I involve the cleaner, for instance, or the fit and turner on the floor, or the plumber that should do the work. Why should I include him? The reason why is, you know as well, is that these guys work with the clients and the people and the job physically daily, in and out. They know what will work and what cannot work. That's just an example. But people that work for you, and especially if they're with you for a period of time, 5 years or 10 years or longer, those guys know the business just as well as you do, in and out. And including them gives them that sense of belonging, that sense of really being part of something, that team environment. If you look at any team, that's the strength. The strength of the rugby team is inclusion, and that will make them involve themselves in any case.
I agree, Peter. You know, one of the premises that I live by, and when I learned this premise, I struggled to understand it until I understood it, and I was like, oh, okay. And because I know this today, every single moment in my life, I come from a curiosity perspective. You know, even the Lunchtime series, you know, for me, it's like, how am I learning? What am I learning? What don't I know yet about anything? And the premise is, you don't know what you don't know until you know you know. You know,
Absolutely.
So sitting in a meeting with your staff, or the cleaners or the salespeople, just sitting in that meeting, because as them representing your brand and your name, you don't know what you don't know, right? And again, people know about that statement, they know about it, but how well do you actively practice that in your day-to-day environment? You don't know what you don't know until you know you know. And when you do know, you're kind of going, okay, cool, I never thought of it that way. I didn't consider that as reasoning behind this the situation that's coming up. And I think COVID in itself, you know, is proving to be a fantastic description of that at the moment, because we're going, well, we don't know what we don't know. But on the other side of this, and it's 3, 4, 5, 6 months later, and we're going, oh, okay, cool. I'm starting to understand. This is what I didn't know about my business. This is what I didn't know about myself. This is what I didn't realize that, I could start taking these videos that we're shooting right now. 6 months ago, you and I wouldn't have even had this conversation because it didn't occur to me. Right. So
exactly. Exactly.
You don't know what you don't know. So it's such an important part of including your staff and having that involvement, because every moment is a learning moment if you choose to see it that way.
Yeah. I usually do an exercise when I do a seminar. You find a lot of people sitting with their arms crossed and actually closing them off to the conversation. So I ask them, do you know what I'm going to say, or something in those along those lines?
Yeah.
Because if you open yourself up, instead of saying I know that for myself, because they're closing themselves, open yourself up and just ask the question, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
By asking the question, isn't that interesting, you actually open yourself up and say, I can learn from this. And then those aha moments come, like you've referred to, and you realize, but I actually now understand it for the first time. This is the way it actually works. And that's it. Just ask the question, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's fantastic, Peter. It's already 30 minutes later, and we almost out of time. In wrapping up today's conversation, what are the points that we should be taking away in today's conversation?
Well, first of all, given I really think that we are, as businesses in this country, shouting for real leaders, for leaders that's willing to take the risk and support the people that they can be pulled up, bringing them up to their level so they can be leaders, so that you can be elevated as a leader. That's really what I thrive for in business, and I'm very passionate about. So we need to look at the leadership encouragement, leadership development, because leadership is not something that we are always born with. Leadership gets developed over a period of time, and that's the reason why you are in business and I am in business, in coaching, because we need to get people there. And yes, for us as coaches, we are all so passionate about this, but it's somewhere along the line, I don't think people always necessarily grasp the fact that as a coach, we can give you that opportunity to get where you need to be. As a leader, as a business owner, and so on. So, yeah. So, I would just like one last question for the viewers and the people out there. In our comments or chat boxes or whatever the case may be, with the word team, when we say team, just give us 3 thoughts from yourself. Just interact with us. If we say team, what comes to mind? 3 things that comes to mind. I would like to know how people think out there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I recommend that everyone, every time we have the Lunchtime series, please get in touch with us. I'd love to chat to people. Peter, as per usual, all our information is going to go out on social media. This also goes live out on eBiz Radio every Friday. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you. You could just search our names on Google, Pieter Gruenbaum and Kevin Britz. We will come up. You can hear more about all of this. I posted all over LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. But thank you, Peter. Thank you for the chat, and thank you for sharing some wisdom with us on this Friday afternoon. And we will see you next week, Friday.
Thank you. All the best, guys. Keep safe, and thanks, Kevin. This is a brilliant platform that you've created. Really, and thoroughly enjoy it. Thanks.
No problem. Thanks, Peter. Chat to you later. Cheers, man.
Cheers.